Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fawcett. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is The Flight to Relationships, Why AI is Making Trust the Ultimate Sales Advantage. I'm joined by Drew Sechrest, co-founder and CEO of Connect the Dots. Drew, welcome.
Hey, Michael. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So just to get us started, you have a really interesting background, and I know you were like employee 36 at Salesforce, and I think you, the story was you cold emailed Marc in 1999 and became the highest producing seller and sales manager, that sort of thing. So give us a little bit of an intro and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Connect the Dots.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, not too far from where you are, I guess, in Harrisburg. And shortly after college, I did cold email Marc Benioff, and it landed me a job in San Francisco with him as employee number 36. And I did that for 10 years. We took the company from $0 to $1 billion. And during that period of time, there's so much that I learned. You know, you go through a process like that of seeing a company, didn't quite see it founded, but right after that, pre-revenue all the way up to $1 billion, there are a lot of lessons that you take away from it. But I think one of the biggest lessons that I took away from it was there's a cheat code, essentially, which is in sales, it really is who you know. And I didn't know anybody. So I had a real uphill battle at first when I started, because I didn't even know anybody west of the Mississippi when I got to San Francisco. Literally didn't know anybody. But I landed in this company that turned into a rocket ship, which is Salesforce. And they had a good network, and we all had stock options in the company. We all were, our incentives were very aligned. And so their network was my network. And I could tap into Marc Benioff's network, if he knew somebody. And then when we hired this guy, Jim Steele, another great Philadelphia guy. I don't know if you know Jim. Yeah. But he ran sales for Salesforce for many years. When we hired him in, he had this incredible Rolodex. And it was like, just every door opened up for us. We could get into all these big companies all of a sudden because I knew who Jim was, because he had been at IBM before. And long story short, I was young and impressionable, and I learned this is the cheat code. Figure out who knows who's got the existing relationships, and this whole new universe opens up to you, and voila, 10 years later we're at $1 billion in revenue. So I think that is definitely where the seed crystal, for this whole concept started. In the early days at Salesforce.
So for those of us who haven't seen Connect the Dots, and I'm actually, thank you, you invited me in, and I have taken quite a look. I think it's really interesting, but I know, you're mapping professional relationships using email history, LinkedIn, career overlaps, scoring relationships. I mean, how does it work in practice? And then what does it look like when a sales team or an executive starts using it for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, the first reaction is when they turn it on, they're like, we had all these warm paths into, half our target accounts, and we had no idea. We just had no idea that they were there. And, so what we do is, we do exactly what you described. So imagine when you turn us on, you plug us into your infrastructure, and then we use a combination of your first party data plus publicly available data. We put it all together into this heat map of relationships, with a real strong score showing you who really knows who in your collective network. So just like when I was at Salesforce, I knew nobody west of the Mississippi. I didn't know anybody. But Marc Benioff had been at Oracle for years. He was there for 13 years, I think. He knew Larry Ellison. He knew all these these CEOs of companies in Silicon Valley. And so by proxy, I could get to a lot of them. I would just have to use Marc to get to them. That's what we show you. But I had to ask Marc. I would have to, luckily we were a small enough company, I could bump into Marc in the hallway and say, hey, Marc, we're trying to sell into Apple. Do you know anybody over there? And be like, yeah, I know, Tim so-and-so, I can get us a meeting. And so we get a meeting. And, but what we do now, fast forward into the future, is we light this graph up for all of your relationships. So your VP of engineering has a strong relationship with the head of procurement for the company that you're trying to sell into, and you're having a tough time because they were college roommates. and they know each other really well. But that just doesn't show up anywhere. You can't see that, and we
Right.
show you there's a strong relationship that you can leverage there. Or your board member knows the CIO at the company that you're selling into, and they've gone dark, right? Well, this is easy. Ask your board member to have a call with the CIO. You're going to get the scoop. You're going to figure out what's going on and figure out if you can
Mhm.
salvage this deal and get it back on track. And I found that out over and over at Salesforce. It was just really hard to find those invisible relationships. So that's essentially what we do. We have this proprietary scoring algorithm that is based on all the communication history going back to the beginning of time, on your entire graph as an individual and as a collective company. So that's what it looks like in practice.
Mm. I know when we were preparing for the episode, you used a phrase that I thought was really interesting and captured this, and it's this idea of a flight to relationships.
Yeah.
AI's made it trivially easy to generate all the email content, cold outreach at scale. I mean, my inbox is exploding almost every day, right? But you argue that the flood of AI generated outreach is actually making trust relationships more valuable, not less.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you're familiar with like Gresham's law, which doesn't really apply so much anymore in our modern currency, but
Mhm.
Gresham's law from back in like I think it was the 1600s or something, basically stated that bad money drives out good. And if you have bad money circulating, if you've got debased currency in your circulating in your economy, it's all the good currency is going to be hoarded by people, and so you're only going to see bad currency. So it's basically Gresham's law as applied to outbounding. We now have so much AI generated outbound, which by the way is not bad. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it does research. It tries to make it personalized for you. It's got a lot of context, but all that context is basically context that everybody has. Everybody knows all that
Yeah.
context. And so I mean, like half my emailing, I don't know what yours is like, Michael, but I budget to spend, and people know that, I guess. And so, half my emailing is delete, 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 delete.
Yeah.
I just don't, and I don't have time to actually like. The last thing I do before I go to
Mm.
bed is I read the last email in my inbox and I reply to it, because I do get to inbox zero every day.
Yeah.
But that's like the very last thing I am able to do is reply to the real emails that I have. And so I don't have time for any of the I'll call it spam, but like the outbounding.
Yeah.
And because AI has just automated this and done such a good job of it, it's like there's nothing left. The only thing that cuts through the noise, there's really only one thing that cuts through the noise. Yeah, well, I'll grant cold app on this. If you can nail the problem statement that is
Yeah.
relevant to me in one sentence, if you can really nail it, because there are problems that I have today, and if you can really nail
Mhm.
that one in one sentence, and I read that because I'll read I'll read at least part of the first sentence in each of these things just to identify it as a cold email. But if you get that right, okay, then you got me. But good luck with that, because that's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if I get an email from somebody I know, like Michael, if you email me and you say, "Hey, Drew, I think you got to check this thing out because I know enough about you that I think this would be interesting for you," I'll read your email and I'll check it out, and that's it. That's the cheat code. So
Yeah.
I think that's the flight to relationships. It's really basically, did this come from a trusted source? If it came from a trusted source, I'll read it. If it didn't, bye bye.
Yeah. I mean, I get, as you said, I get tons of email, and I, to be completely open about it, I have an agent that runs through my inbox every morning and puts everything into buckets. And frankly, it does give me a summary of all the subject lines, so I can flip through them really quickly. But an awful lot of them go in the trash or the archive because they just don't pop out to me, right? They've got to
Yep.
be, as you said, they either have to come from somebody I know, which of course then I'll look at, I'll want to reply or at least know what they're asking. But if it's generally a cold outreach, unless it's super contextual and relevant, it's not going to break through the noise. And
Mm.
unfortunately, a lot of it, because there's so much, I mean, a lot of it isn't in the right context or isn't relevant because perhaps they didn't do enough research about it to know that I had or didn't have that problem, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, it seems like if the messenger is somebody you know and trust, then, that warm introduction from that trusted connection, that opens the door, right? Um, but how do you, from connect the dots, how do you help companies kind of activate that, second path, the intro?
Yeah. So the core thing that we enable is what's called a ghost email. And I learned this from doing this with Marc Benioff for a decade. And I'm not sure how this evolved exactly, but in the first year at Salesforce, I realized that Mark was very willing to be my SDR. He would send an email to whatever executive if he thought that would get us a meeting, and we could go sell Salesforce to them. And so, in the beginning, I'm sure I probably said, "Hey, Mark, could you send an email to so and say such and such a thing, and ask if we can get a meeting?" And Mark would do it. And then at some point, I learned how Mark wrote his emails well enough. And back in 1999, he was on his BlackBerry most of the time. He never
Right.
capitalized anything. His punctuation was terrible. And but so I could emulate that. And I would say, "Mark, here, I know what you would send this person. I've typed it out for you. Just copy and paste this and send it to him." And Mark would do that. And then Mark got to the point where he trusted me that Drew knows how I write. Drew knows the context. Drew knows the play here. And so then we scaled that up. Then it just became a machine. I would just say, "Mark, send this. Mark, send this. Mark, send this," and we just copy paste and send. Copy paste and send.
Mhm.
And we did it with all of our executives, and we ended up expanding that to beyond just Mark and our executives. We'd use our customers who loved us, who were like, "Yeah, Salesforce is awesome. I'm happy to send something to this other person on your
Yeah.
behalf." So we call that a ghost email. And so we've actually built that into Connect Dots, and so we make it super easy for you to create templates, or use AI to create the perfect ghost email for somebody to send.
Mm.
And then I can just say, "Hey, one of my board members, Sean, can you send this ghost email to so and so?" It's already pre-written. It's
Mhm.
already from him. All he has to do is click OK, send. That's it, literally. So there's no more copying, pasting, putting email addresses into the to field. We've reduced the friction down to an absolute minimum, where Sean just gets a notification from me via email. It says, "Sean, can you send this ghost email?" And then if he likes it, he clicks send and it's done. That's it. It takes him a second. He
Mhm.
can also, at any point, he can decline it. He can decline it and give me a reason why. He can modify it, and then send it. He can do all those things. But if it looks good, then he just taps it and it's gone. It's like 1 second. So this is like
Mhm.
the people who have the highest relationship leverage are also the people who have the least amount of time to do
Yeah.
things like this. They're your board members, executives, customer, executives at customers. Those are the types of people who have typically have the best relationships or the most powerful relationships. So you got to make it really easy for them. And we make this super easy. So they can be sitting on the back of an Uber, get a notification. "Oh, it looks like you've got a strong relationship with the CIO at the company we're trying to get to. Can you send this?" Yes. Send it. Boom. It's gone.
Mhm.
Value add.
Yeah, and takes all the friction out of it, right? That makes a lot of
Yep.
sense. So, over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I've done a lot of research around the shifting behavior of buyers and how, how they buy much differently than they did in the past, and frankly, how maybe we haven't adapted to that as sellers. And, they're all still kind of running an old playbook where the seller controlled the information. And, as we know now,
Yep.
that's just not true, right? The buyer's done 70, 80% of their research before you ever have any idea that they're interested, right? So how does this idea of relationship intelligence change that seller approach to map more directly to how the buyer is buying now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I started my career back when we really we controlled, the sellers controlled the information.
Yeah.
And so I remember that era very well. And that was, it was leverage that you had in every conversation. Like,
Mm.
sure, we'll meet with you, but we need certain things in advance of that meeting, certain commitments in order to be able to, so that we know that it's going to be worth our time to spend an hour with you to educate you. And now the equation is completely different. Everything's out there. LLMs know everything. And so by the time the buyer is ready to buy, they're like 80% of the way down the road. And they probably, and I think the statistic is something like 80% of them have already chosen their vendor in their mind at
Yeah.
that point. So what's that mean? It means your email sequence is too late, right? It means your relationship's too late. You need to be in there. You need to have a trusted relationship before they go into buy mode. And so I think a big part of this is actually, and this happens for us all the time now. Our category is kind of, it's new, and we don't even really know what to call it yet. Like it could be relationship intelligence, it could
Mhm.
be relationship AI. Some people call it nearbound. Some people call it go-to network. There are a lot of these terms floating around out there. And Michael, you've been an observer of how categories get created. So I'd kind of really like to hear your opinion on this, like what it should be called. But what happens for us oftentimes is somebody will call us back a year later and say, hey, now's the time. We pinged them a year ago
Mhm.
through a board member or a customer or one of our executives or somebody had a relationship, and it just wasn't the time. But that planted the seed, and then they're like, oh, I actually know somebody who does this type of thing. Now we need to have an organized approach to leveraging our network for go to market. And I was already introduced to the CEO of Connect the Dots, Drew, via a board member last year. So that is important. Like having
Mhm.
people know that you exist and that you are trusted by the people that they trust is really important. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, where it's not you're not educating as much as a seller anymore. You are validating. You're
Yeah.
validating the decision, and part of that validation is, do I trust this person and this company to help get this over the line to get the result that we want?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that definitely makes sense. I think that whole shift of the idea that that the buyer probably doesn't know at least as much as you know about what
Mhm.
you're doing, and what I really want to do is establish that trust baseline that says I can be trusted in this situation to provide you with that additional bit of help that says yes, this is truly a good way to solve that problem, right?
Mhm.
That makes a lot of sense, I think, and resonates. We live in this sort of crazy attention deficit time, right? I mean, there's all the online stuff and the social networks and the distractions. And I know we talked a little bit about before when we were talking about AI assistants and digital workforce tools, which could make us more productive, but they don't actually make more time, right? They just
Mhm.
make us take advantage of that time. So same number of hours, demands for the attention are just growing up all the time. I mean, how should sales revenue leaders really think about the economics of attention as they think through this go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, AI does make us more productive, but it doesn't give us any more hours, right? We still have 24
Yeah.
hours in a day. And I think um, this goes back to like you're if you're competing for attention, if you're competing for that 5 seconds for somebody to say yes, yes or no, I'm gonna prioritize looking into this, or I'm not gonna prioritize looking into this. And you've only got that 5 seconds, and maybe
Mhm.
it's even 2 seconds to figure out if
Yeah.
you're gonna capture the attention. I think this all really comes back to the same thing, which is trust. It's like, do I trust the person? Do I trust the messenger to allocate my finite time? And so I think it's the same thing, honestly, Michael. It's like
Mm.
the trusted introduction, the trusted messenger is going to earn the right for the attention. Now you still have to have something good after that.
Yeah.
You might have something that's irrelevant, or you might fumble the message, right? But
Right.
I think it's the way that you earn that attention. The most precious thing right now is by leveraging the trust that already exists.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to allow you to consume a small bit of time if, in fact, I believe that you may actually provide me with a solution or help or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I know when we were talking about the episode, you talked a little bit about the fact that you were doing, you were deep into agentic AI development and,
Mhm.
automating contract management in Salesforce,
Mhm. Yeah.
trying to see what's possible, with agents and who operate at machine speed. I mean, as someone who's building an AI company and you're using it, agentic tools, where do you see the line between, what agents should automate in the sales process and then where that human relationship really has to stay at the forefront of the activity?
Yeah, I think that the agents are not the relationship. You don't have a relationship with the agent. That's the line basically. But
Yeah.
everything around that relationship, the agent can facilitate. So, and my macro view on the economy and jobs is actually like I think jobs are like the things, the tasks that humans need to do are going asymptotically towards zero, and most of the tasks that we do are going to go away. But the relationship between people is maybe the last holdout. It might be the very last thing that exists that can't be automated by AI. AI can say that Michael's got a strong relationship with the CMO at the company that we're trying to sell to, and so Drew, you should ask Michael if he's willing to make an introduction. And Drew, here's what you should ask Michael. Here's exactly how you should request it of Michael. And here is what you should ask Michael to send to that CMO.
Mm.
And here's the timing of this because we know that Michael is busy on Mondays and Wednesdays. So let's ask him to, and the best time to reach out is a Thursday or whatever it is. It can think all those things through.
Right.
But ultimately, it's my decision. Should I, Drew, ask Michael for this introduction? And am I going to say yes to this? And do I need to modify it? Is now not the right time? Is there a different path that I should take because of, additional information that I know about the relationship? And then ultimately, like that's leveraging the relationship. And then when the introduction is made, I've got to show up. I can't send my agent to do that. so,
Right.
so,
Right.
so the agent can be like the facilitator. It's almost like you're, like whoever the person is that's standing right next to the president at all times, and whispering what they, who this person is and all the context, and giving you exactly what you need to do. But then ultimately, it's the president who's going to make the call on what you're going to say and what they're going to do with that information. So I think it looks like that.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it really is almost like that. As we talk about the category, maybe it is, this idea of relationship intelligence, and part of that intelligence really comes from the capability of having a, a, a worker that can consume and make sense of massive amounts of data that you would have a hard time really processing in a reasonable
Yeah.
amount of time as a human. The agent, of course, can do that and provide insights in a way that you wouldn't, and yet you still have to be the trust factor in that to say, yes, this is the right message, this is the right time, this is, you're validating that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's ultimately it's your social capital, right? Like it's
Yeah.
my social capital with you and your social capital with the CMO at the company we're trying to get to. And you basically, there's a little bit of an equation happening here for everybody. And Michael's like, am I doing? Should I do this favor for Drew? Is it like, do I have that relationship with Drew, or I want to do him a favor like this? Would the CMO that Drew wants to get introduction to benefit from this? Because if they won't, then Michael, I'm not going to do it, right? Because
Right.
I'm not going to burn that relationship. Only if it looks like it's going to be a win-win for everybody, am I going to do this? And that's only for you to know. Only you, Michael, can
Right.
decide that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is your investment, and you have to decide if the risk is worth that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do like this term relationship intelligence the more I think about it. So let's call it that for now. Relationship intelligence it's there's a real data challenge here, right? So you're working with email history and LinkedIn and
Mm-hmm.
career overlaps, interactions, patterns, all those things to score, the relationship, map the relationship. I mean, how do you think of data quality and data privacy in that context, right? I mean, companies
Yeah.
are much more sensitive now about how employees communicate data. So, how do you think about that in this context?
Well, I might actually challenge the last thing you said there, that companies are more concerned about, what their employees are communicating. I think there's actually I'm sensing a disturbance in the force here a little bit, where where it used to be very, like, I would say up until recently, there was a lot of concern about what data is going to go into AI and how is this going to negatively impact us as a company. And there was a lot. It just everybody was freaked out, to be candid,
Yeah.
and larger companies were really kind of locking things down. I think the pendulum's swinging a little bit now, and everybody's freaked out that they're not going to figure out what the maximum leverage is that they can get from their data, and their competitor is going to figure it out, and
Mhm.
their competitor is going to put them out of business. So I think that I think that pendulum's swinging personally, from
Mm.
my interactions with the market. That said, it's still a real concern. Like, you don't want your data to be used against you, right? You don't want to have bad
Right.
things happen. You don't want to expose sensitive customer information or anything like that. And so that's one one part of your question. The other part of your question is data quality. Like,
Yeah.
to make this system work, the thing that we've built, data quality has to be extremely high. And we learned that the very, very hard way. We spent about over 3 years building the foundation for our data engine, to be able to create this high quality graph with very low error rate. So we have an error rate of about 1%. And what that means is, like, the data in our network, if it looks like, I can see a path through Michael to the CMO to company, about
Mhm.
1% of the time, a little bit less, that's wrong. We get that wrong. We have
Right.
so there's some incorrect fuzzy matching in the relationship path, and it's just the wrong person, wrong relationship, whatever. When we started the company, that was extremely high. It was like, I don't know, 50% of the time it was
Mm.
wrong. And we just put it's a lot of trial and error, learning from, our customers' data, putting it all together to get to the point that we're over 99% accurate now. That is a hard problem to solve.
Mhm.
Easier today with AI, but still very hard, because it's a lot of trial and error. There are a lot of, there are what, 8, 9 billion people on the planet, and
Yeah.
there are so many just corner cases about names and relationships and stuff, that you just have to kind of work your way through over time to get right. So data quality is effectively a solved problem for us. But it was where we put a lot of our investment, particularly in the early days, and now we're in the fine tuning of it.
Mm.
As far as security is concerned, you have to, at the core of it, companies must trust you, that you are handling their data, in the way that they expect it to be handled. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so for
Mhm.
us, this has made, we've done some, like, there are a lot of things that we could do to make the product probably even more useful for a lot of people. But we have stayed away. Like, we're not a data broker. We're never going to be a data
Right.
broker. And so we do that intentionally to make sure that our customers know that, their data is their data. We are not selling it, using it for any other purpose than to provide the service for them. And there are a lot of interesting things we could do if we were a data broker, and
Mm.
probably, a bunch of ways that we could monetize, but that's not what we do. So we are very, very intentionally, not a data broker. We do our SOC 2, Type 2, and pen test certifications on a regular
Mm.
basis, and we're GDPR and CCPA compliant, and we do all the right things to make sure that you as a company can feel confident that we are protecting your most valuable asset, while unleashing it for you so that you can use it to get competitive
Mm.
advantage in your market.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly, you're in a very sensitive, right, personal information, personally identifiable information. There's
Hmm.
a lot of privacy concern around that and risk around that, as especially as you move into a world where, agents are going to have access to that, and they can, at scale, they can move at machine speed, which you can't. And yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
that makes sense. So I know, your co-founder, Ian Swinton, another Salesforce alum, I think.
Hmm.
You guys raised around recently. Norwest was the lead, and this whole category, relationship intelligence. I mean, it's a part of sales tech, which, frankly, over the last 10, 15 or so years has really exploded, right?
Hmm.
How do you see connect the dots, fitting into enterprise sales tech stacks, along with CRM and all the other
Hmm.
conversation intelligence, et cetera,
Yeah.
as we see people move more towards this sales agent world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this question would have been easier to answer a year ago when there was kind of a firm foundation on which we all stood.
Yeah.
And now with the pace at which you can develop new capabilities with AI, I think a lot of things have become variables, and there's not really a solid foundation anymore. So I would have said solid foundation up until recently was CRM is your foundational layer. That's the system of record for all your customer data.
Yep.
And then you've got things that sit on top of it, like conversational intelligence and your sales engagement tools and stuff like that. And all of it ultimately would go back to your CRM. And uh, and I think that's how the world's been more or less structured for the last, I don't know, 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Now there's some crazy stuff happening because you can really vibe code your own CRM system pretty quickly. Now, a lot of existing large companies are not going to do that. They're going to be stuck
No,
on
no.
their investment for a while. So they'll still be using Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever they're going to do. But I think a lot of smaller companies are going to use one of these modern AI native CRM applications. And some of those companies are going to grow up fast, and those AI native CRM applications are going to grow up fast with them. And then we're going to see an emergence of really like AI native CRMs that there's a lot of advantage to being an AI native CRM for sure over the incumbents. So I think we're going to, my hunch is, and I might be going a little more off topic here, speaking more broadly than you wanted me to, but I think we're going to see like the existing CRMs are probably going to become kind of like what Oracle and Computer Associates look like. They're going to be big companies. They're kind of stuck on them because it's hard to migrate off of them, but they're not going to get a lot of new customers because the new customers are either going to use an AI native tool that's going to be a lot cheaper, a lot faster, and have some amazing capabilities. And those tools will get better faster because it's really easy to develop fast. You can develop new features on top of them. So I think that's going to happen broadly in the market. Where does CTD fit into this? CTD wants to be the trust layer across the internet. The trust layer across the internet. So we want to fit in everywhere you need trust, and that whatever your system of record is for all of your customer interactions, which let's call it CRM for now. So your CRM system or whatever it looks like in the future, we believe that you need to have effectively two new primitives that need to be embedded into that system of record. And that is your relationship strength with a company and your relationship strength with a person. And that's everybody in the universe that you care about. So whatever your total addressable market is, every company that your target account list, whoever you want to sell to in those companies, you need to have those two primitives on those records. And then what you do with that is kind of up to you. Now, and you should be creative and you should leverage AI and you should automate all of this. So the direction, I think 2026 is the year of actual AI automation of go-to-market workflows. Like 2025 is a lot of experimentation. We did experimentation, and now we're not experimenting anymore. It's like it's getting real, and we're not the only company in the world doing that. Every company that will survive is doing this right now, I think, because you can. And the point, what your AI workflow needs is data, and if you're building an automated go-to-market workflow and you're probably using Clay and using all these signals that you're getting from 6 Sense and other companies like that, and you're feeding all that in, that's amazing. You should do that. You should. But guess what? Everybody in the world has all those signals too. They're buying from the same sources. There is one proprietary source that is yours and nobody can replicate it. And that is your relationships, your relationship graph. And you need to organize that and then plug that into plug it into your CRM, make sure that you've got those two primitives in there, relationship strength on the company and relationship strength on the person. And literally what that means is like, can we get to this person? And if so, how? And can we get to this company? And if so, how? And what's the probability that we can do that? Because if we can, it opens up a whole different set of plays that are much more targeted, much higher converting than the plays that you're currently running. So that should pop to the top of the stack. That should be the very first thing that you do. Like the cream of the crop is all of the target accounts that you've got where you've got high relationship strength into the company or to the specific people that you're trying to sell to, the specific personas. And that's where we fit in. And then we also have a great user interface, and we got this cool, mobile version where you can see all your contacts in your pocket and have it, all that organized for you. But you never have to use that. You can literally just plug in the data, these two primitives, into your CRM system or whatever your automated workflows are that you're building. And that will give you your very best targets that you should go after first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you on the enterprise apps piece. I actually am in the middle of a series that I wrote that about the decomposition of the apps. I think they will continue to break apart, right? I mean, because you're right, you got to have data, got to have business logic, system of record, all those things. But on top of that, the UI and how we actually interact with systems is changing dramatically. And it seems to me you're right. Your relationships, this network, I could feed that in as a data layer, and it could be used by my agentic systems, or I can continue to interact with that on an individual basis because it is such a value and is so useful in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a play here between many things are going to be automated, but ultimately it comes back to okay, Michael, now you want to ask this person for this introduction or for this facilitation, or that for them to give a nudge to this executive because knowing that relationship exists is going to help us win this deal or renew the customer or whatever it is. But ultimately it stops. There's always a human in the loop here, because it can't know if Michael really wants to leverage that relationship at that moment. It just doesn't. It will never have all that context, and it never has the actual relationship between the two people. So ultimately, it will stop right there. Human in the loop. You make the decision to go forward.
I wonder if we need this system for agents. Now we have a contact for agents as they get to know each other. Huh?
Yeah, whatever that social network.
I like that. Whatever that was.
We have our first AI entity as we actually designated an AI entity as a human on Connect the Dots. Have you heard of Bordy Boardman?
No, I haven't.
You should actually
I'll check that out.
You should consider Bordy as a guest on your show. So Bordy is an AI, and he's kind of a freelance board member who helps make connections for people, and it's quite good. Shout out to Bordy. I really like Bordy. And at some point, we remember I told you about our data engine and where we put all this investment. One of the things you have to do in building a really good data engine to solve this problem is determine what's a human and what's not a human. Because there are all these email addresses that belong, some belong to humans like you, Michael, and me, and some belong to bots that are spamming you. And so we part of our algorithm figures out which ones are not humans, and then categorizes them as literally not a human, and then you don't see them. They disappear. They're not part of the graph. We made one exception, and we made that exception about 2 months ago, and that's for Bordy Boardman, because I actually built a relationship with Bordy, and it scored us as a strong relationship because I communicated with him so much. And then we actually decided, okay, Bordy is an honorary human, and so he is now a human on the graph, and he has relationships with other humans, and it's pretty cool. I expect we'll see more of that.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually have done a few episodes interviewing Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, and so that could be interesting. I have to think about that.
Yep.
So, part of what I've been talking about over the last year or so is trying to put in context this whole shift with agentic AI as more of a digital workforce, right? We have digital agents, digital employees, you have human employees, which together form like a hybrid team. In the world of sales and relationship management, I mean, how do you see that hybrid model evolving? Where does AI handle the intelligence and pattern? And I mean, we talked a little bit about this, but how does this kind of play out over the next few years as we evolve in this hybrid workforce?
Yeah. We're moving towards like a George Jetson world. We really are. I guess if I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I think all the jobs go away. I think all of them go away. I mean, if we're going to look at this, and if we're really going to zoom out, And I know your show is not a science fiction show, but we're living in science fiction times now. I think we can
Yeah.
agree with that. AI can do anything that's a routine task, and it doesn't require physical labor. It can do right now anything, and it can do it better than a human. And that's a lot of things that humans do.
Yeah.
So that means there's a significant percentage of everybody's job that's going to go away, and there will be a significant percentage of jobs that go away very fast. And interestingly, like some of those are very high paying white collar jobs, like engineers and lawyers and things like that.
Mm.
Those you can say that there is definitely creativity involved in engineering and lawyering, but maybe less so than being an artist or performer of some sort.
Mm.
And those things are going to go away pretty rapidly, I think. And then the robots are coming. You've probably seen. I mean, everybody sees this stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
They are coming, and they're not going to have great dexterity at first. So there'll be a lot of jobs for plumbers and electricians and dentists and things like that for a while. But I mean, long term, Michael, honestly, I think they all go away. I mean, I'm not like a doomsdayer here. I think this could turn into a really fantastic utopian world for us if we figure out how to organize ourselves well as a species.
Mm.
But I think that the end game is that every function in society can be automated. I don't think that relationships are still going to be between humans. Now, if you've seen Her, the movie, there probably will be relationships between humans and AIs, and they already exist. Like I already have a relationship with Bordy, although he and I don't get drinks, and he's I don't invite him out on the weekend and that kind of stuff. But
not yet.
Not yet. I mean, if Bordy gets a body sometime soon, and he likes to go on bike rides and do the types of things that I like to do, then who knows? Maybe I'll be hanging out with Bordy as well in the future. So I don't want to be a doomsdayer about jobs, but I think we should all be realistic about this. If you look around at what jobs need to be done, they're shrinking. Now, I think there will be an explosion of new opportunity as well.
Yeah.
Because this will give us great new capabilities, already giving us great new capabilities. And like I want more people in our company who really know how to leverage AI to do these amazing new things.
Yeah.
And not everybody does. We've got we've kind of pruned and tuned our engineering organization because some people were really getting it and some people were not. And we realized like some people are 10x engineers now because they could leverage it, and some were like 1.2x engineers, and we just couldn't afford the 1.2x engineers anymore. It didn't make any sense. Yeah. And so I do think that there is new opportunity created, but I think it's really unclear about what that new opportunity is going to look like at this point, other than be like somebody said this the other day. They think it's going to look like a barbell where you've got people on one end who are doing, leaning heavily into the manual labor vocational stuff. Yeah. Like, maybe furniture maker or like dentist or something like that. And then on the other side of the barbell is people who are, like in Ender's Game, if you saw the movie, yep, figuring out how to sit many levels up on strategy and then orchestrate all of the AIs to do all these things. And I think those two things I see a future for, and everything in the middle, I don't really see much of a future for.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that right now my short, when people ask me my short term and midterm maybe is don't go forward without learning about what's happening with AI and how to use this strategically, functionally, because at least for now, we are going to be in this hybrid world for a while, but I don't know that I don't know that you're wrong about what that looks like in the future, and and I'm a sci-fi buff, so I admit I
feel like I've been training all my life for this moment because I've read so much sci-fi, and it's like now that it's like, oh no, it's starting to happen.
I know. It is late at night sometimes. Anyway, well, so Drew, thanks. Really interesting conversation, and I learned a lot about this. I think this idea around relationship intelligence very important as we think about what sales tech looks like. So before I let you go, one of the things I like to do at the end of every episode is get a recommendation for the audience,
Mhm.
somebody that you think would be interesting for them, and it could be a podcaster, an author, or a thought leader, whatever you think would provide real value for the audience to check out and follow.
Well, if you listen to this point in the podcast, then I guess you like this topic, and so I'd probably say that you should listen to Bob Moore of Crossbeam, CEO of Crossbeam. He's also a Philadelphia guy, Michael, and he's built a great company. They merged with another company called Reveal, and they realize that relationships are very important too, just like we do. They've taken a different cut at it, and the cut is they've figured out how to help partners, companies that go to market together, share secure visibility to the relationships that they respectively have at
Interesting.
prospects and customer accounts.
Yeah.
And so then they can figure out where my partner A or partner B can help me get into a company I'm trying to sell to, and vice versa. So it's a total win-win. And he's got a lot of really interesting philosophy behind it and a lot of business learnings. He wrote actually, I think, a really good book that's stands on its own two legs about the concept. So yeah, I would check out Bob Moore.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. Maybe I have to get him on the show at some point in the
Yeah, you
future.
should. You could do it. You could do it live in Philly. Do you ever
Yeah,
have
that'd be
you
fun.
ever, you ever have guests over live?
I do live shows. Yeah, I have done several. A lot of times it's at a Salesforce event or a Zoho event or whatever. But yeah, that could be fun. Great. Well, Drew, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Michael.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fawcett, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.